welcome to the deep dive.
Oh, great to be here.
Today we're going to be looking at the forces that shape a business.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to look at those forces both from the inside and out.
Okay.
So we've got some interesting excerpts from a VCE business management study design document to unpack. We'll be using real-world examples to kind of make this stuff a little bit more interesting. So we've got Spotify, Mars, even Netflix.
Oh, cool.
To sort of, bring these concepts to life. Have you ever thought about how deeply
for sure
connected a business is with its environment?
Yeah, it's like I think about it like a living organism, right? It has its own kind of internal workings, but it also constantly interacts and adapts with its surroundings.
Okay, so let's start by defining this term business environment. Our source material describes it as all the surrounding conditions in which a business operates.
Okay.
It's split into two main categories.
Okay.
Internal and external.
Mm-hmm.
So think of it like it's like a puzzle, but the pieces are constantly shifting.
Okay, so it's not a static puzzle.
Right, not a static puzzle at all.
Okay.
It's very dynamic.
I like that. Yeah.
And each of those pieces represents a stakeholder.
Uh-huh.
So each with their own, unique interests and demands. Management has this kind of challenging task of balancing these sometimes conflicting interests.
Yes, for sure.
To steer the business in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
So first we're going to zoom in and look at the internal environment.
Okay.
Sometimes called the micro environment.
Right.
And this is where the business has the most control, kind of like the heart of the operation.
Uh-huh.
So what are some of the key elements we find here?
Well, we're talking about the people within the business. So, we're thinking employees, managers, leadership teams.
Yeah.
The physical location plays a role, as does the legal structure the business operates under.
Mm-hmm.
But perhaps the most interesting and often overlooked element is company culture.
Ah, yes.
Right.
Company culture.
Mm-hmm.
Our source material highlights Spotify.
Oh, cool.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
They've intentionally built a fun and inspiring office environment to encourage employee creativity and engagement.
Yeah, for sure.
They even had these things called Spotify sessions.
I've heard about this.
At their Australian office. Have you heard about this?
Yeah, I've heard that they
bring in music artists.
They bring in music artists for live performances.
Right in the office.
Right.
Imagine the energy.
Right, in the office.
That creates.
I know.
Right.
It's not just about perks.
Yeah.
It's about reminding those employees that they're a part of something bigger.
Yeah.
Something that connects people through music.
Yeah.
That kind of environment can be a huge asset for attracting and retaining talent.
Yeah.
I'd say.
It's not just about beanbag chairs and free snacks.
No.
It's about creating a space where people feel valued and inspired to do their best work.
Right.
So now let's shift our focus outward to the external environment where things can get a bit more unpredictable.
Yeah, definitely. Like navigating a choppy sea out there.
Yeah.
Businesses need to be able to adapt to external pressures.
Right.
And kind of adjust their sails to stay afloat.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So the external environment encompasses everything outside the business that can influence its operations. So what are some of the forces at play in this external environment?
We can break it down into two subcategories.
Okay.
The operating environment and the macro environment. And as you might guess, businesses have less control over these forces, which makes adaptability a key survival skill.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's start by diving deeper into the operating environment. It sounds like this is where the business interacts directly with specific external stakeholders. It's all about relationships, right?
Precisely.
Okay.
In the operating environment, we're dealing with customers, competitors, suppliers, and special interest groups.
Okay.
Each of these stakeholders has a unique relationship with the business and can exert influence in different ways.
So break it down for us. Who are these stakeholders and how do they interact with the business?
Well, customers are obviously vital. They're the lifeblood of any business. Without customers to buy products or services, there's no revenue.
No revenue,
Competitors, on the other hand, are vying for those same customers. They create pressure to innovate, keep prices competitive, and constantly improve offerings.
So it sounds like a delicate dance, trying to keep everyone has.
It is.
And the business moving forward. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we have suppliers.
Right. Supplier.
Who provide the essential resources. A business needs to operate.
Yep.
Everything from raw materials to technology to office supplies.
Yep. Everything.
So building strong relationships with suppliers is critical for ensuring a smooth and reliable flow of those resources.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then finally, we have special interest groups.
Okay.
These groups can be focused on a variety of issues. Think environmental protection, labor rights, consumer advocacy.
Okay.
They can exert pressure on businesses to adopt certain policies or procedures, often by influencing public opinion or even government regulations.
It's like a whole ecosystem.
It is, yeah.
Of interconnected players.
Exactly. Think about a business you interact with regularly. Maybe a coffee shop.
Yeah.
A clothing store. An online retailer.
Sure.
You'll start to see all these stakeholders at play in the operating environment.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Now let's zoom out even further and explore the macro environment. It sounds like we're talking about the big picture stuff here.
Yeah.
Broader forces that shape the landscape for all businesses.
You got it.
Okay.
The macro environment encompasses, broad economic, social, technological, even global trends.
So it's really the ultimate context.
Think of it as the ultimate context in which a business operates.
Yeah.
It includes factors like legal and government regulations, societal attitudes and behavior, economic conditions, technological advancements, global considerations, and corporate social responsibility.
Wow.
A lot to keep track of.
Yeah, that's a lot to keep track of.
It is.
It makes sense why understanding these macro forces is crucial for strategic planning and long-term success.
Absolutely.
Right.
Failing to adapt to these forces can be detrimental.
Yeah.
You mentioned Netflix earlier. Think about how the rise of streaming services, a macro environmental trend, completely disrupted the traditional television and movie industry.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a big change.
That's a great example.
Huge.
Okay, so we've talked about the internal environment where a business has more control.
Right.
And the external environment where they need to be incredibly adaptable. But how do these two spheres actually interact? They can't be totally separate.
No, they're deeply intertwined.
Right. Okay.
While we categorize them separately for understanding, they're very much connected. In most cases, it's the external environment that holds more sway.
Yeah.
Heavily influencing a business's internal decisions and strategies.
Right. Think of it like this.
Okay.
The external environment throws punches.
Okay.
And the business has to roll with them, adjusting its internal operations to survive and thrive.
Okay.
Right.
So can you give us like a concrete example?
Yeah, sure.
Of how that plays out in the real world?
The case study on Mars incorporated in our source material is a perfect illustration of how external forces shape internal choices.
Okay, let's dive into that. All ears.
Great.
So Mars, the company behind, Snickers, M&Ms, those iconic candy bars.
Right.
What kind of external punches are they dodging?
Well, one big shift has been consumer demand.
Okay.
For healthier and more sustainable products. People are becoming more conscious of what they eat and where their food comes from. So that external pressure directly impacted Mars's internal decisions, leading them to develop product lines like Mars Edge, which caters to these health-conscious consumers.
Interesting. So they're adapting their products to align with shifting societal attitudes, which is part of that macro environment we were discussing earlier.
Exactly.
But wouldn't creating a whole new product line
it would
be a pretty big internal undertaking?
It certainly is.
Yeah.
It likely required research and development, marketing and branding, and perhaps even adjustments to their production processes.
So it illustrates how a shift in the macro environment can ripple through to a company's core operations.
For sure.
Okay, so consumers are pushing for healthier options. But what about sustainability?
Right.
Is that a factor?
Absolutely.
For a company like Mars?
Mars is deeply committed to ethical cocoa sourcing, especially in light of global shortages concerns about deforestation and unfair labor practices in cocoa-producing regions.
It's fascinating how a global issue, like cocoa shortages, can ripple all the way down to a company's internal operations.
It's all connected.
Yeah. They can't just ignore these things, can they?
Not if they want to maintain a positive brand image and stay competitive.
Right.
Mars has had to adapt their supply chains, invest in sustainable practices, and even collaborate with other organizations to address these complex challenges. For example, they've implemented farmer training programs to improve cocoa yields and support community development in cocoa-producing regions.
So they're really putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, they're actually taking concrete steps to address these issues.
Yeah.
It's a lot more than just slapping a fair trade label on a chocolate bar.
Right, exactly.
It requires a deep understanding of the interconnectedness of their business with the social and environmental landscape.
Right.
And remember, Mars operates in over 73 countries, each with its own set of laws regarding labor, marketing, and pricing. To thrive in this complex global environment, they need a robust internal team of legal and taxation professionals to ensure compliance with all those regulations.
That sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It can be.
Yeah.
But it highlights how deeply intertwined a business is with its external environment.
They can't just focus on making candy.
No.
They have to be.
Got to think bigger.
Global citizens.
Yeah, global citizens in a sense.
In a sense, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and of course, let's not forget about competition.
Right, competition.
The confectionery market is huge.
Incredibly competitive.
So competitive.
Right.
Consumers can easily switch between brands to stay ahead.
Yeah.
Mars has to constantly innovate and maintain cost leadership.
Wait, hold on. Back up for a second.
Sure.
What does cost leadership mean in this context?
It essentially means being able to produce and sell your products at a lower cost
than your competitors, allowing you to offer competitive prices and maintain profitability.
Gotcha.
To achieve this.
Okay.
Mars has embraced advanced technology in their production lines to boost efficiency and keep costs down.
So they're using internal strategies like technology adoption to respond to these external pressures from competitors.
Exactly.
The constant balancing act.
It is a balancing act.
They're juggling consumer demands, global issues, legal regulations, competitive pressures.
It's a lot.
All while trying to make delicious candy.
Yeah, quite a feat.
Right.
And while we've been focusing on how the external environment shapes a business, it's important to remember that it's not always a one-way street.
Okay.
Businesses can also exert influence on their surroundings.
So businesses can actually push back?
To an extent, yeah.
And shape their operating environment?
It's often on a smaller scale.
Okay.
But yeah, they can be agents of change.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I always thought of them as, being at the mercy of external forces.
They are to a large extent.
Okay.
But they can also, make change. Think about how companies influence customers. The source material uses the example of smartphones and social media apps. These innovations, born within the internal environment of tech companies, have radically transformed how we communicate, consume information, and even behave.
It's true.
Right.
I can barely remember life before smartphones.
Me neither.
But are all these changes positive?
That's a good question.
Right.
Yeah.
I sometimes wonder if we've become too reliant on these devices.
Yeah.
Has our attention span shrunk? Are we sacrificing real-world connections?
It's possible.
I'm not so sure it's all been for the best.
Those are important questions to consider. Yeah. It's a classic example of how internal decisions within a business can have unintended consequences at a societal level.
Right.
It highlights the ethical responsibility businesses have to consider the broader impact of their products and innovations.
Makes sense.
But it's not just about tech companies.
Right.
Businesses can also impact their suppliers.
Okay.
Often by implementing ethical sourcing policies that encourage sustainable and responsible practices. They can respond to competitors' moves, sparking price wars or innovation races that benefit consumers.
Interesting.
And their operations can significantly impact local communities through job creation, environmental impact, even things like traffic patterns.
It reminds me of that time when that big organic grocery store, opened up in my town.
Okay.
It was a huge deal.
Yeah.
Not only did it create jobs, but it revitalized the whole downtown area.
Wow.
It became a community hub.
That's great.
And it really showed how a business can have a positive ripple effect.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
It highlights the potential businesses have to create positive change within their communities.
Right.
Now, to really bring this interplay to life, let's shift our attention to the fascinating case study on Netflix.
Oh, Netflix.
It's a prime example.
I think we could all use a good Netflix deep dive.
Yeah. Their algorithms are legendary.
They've definitely changed the way we watch movies and TV shows.
Sure.
I'm curious to hear what the source material has to say about them.
Yeah, let's get into it.
So how does Netflix fit into this whole internal and external environment discussion?
Yeah, well...
It seems like a pretty straightforward business. They provide entertainment.
Right.
We consume it.
Yeah.
What's so complex about that?
Well, on the surface, it might seem simple.
Okay.
But beneath the surface lies this fascinating web of internal decisions and algorithms that have a profound impact on what we watch and even how we perceive the world.
Right. Yeah.
The source material highlights how Netflix's internal algorithms and content categorization influence viewer choices. It's not just about what we want to watch.
Yeah.
It's about what the algorithm thinks.
Right.
We'll enjoy based on our viewing history and the patterns of millions of other users.
It's like they've created this giant data-driven machine.
It is, yeah.
That's constantly learning and predicting our tastes.
It is.
Even if we don't fully understand them ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and while personalized recommendations can be convenient and help us discover new content, there's a potential downside. By relying on algorithms to curate our viewing experience, we risk being limited to a narrow range of genres and perspectives. So instead of broadening our horizons, we might end up stuck in an echo chamber of content that just reinforces our existing preferences.
Exactly. That's a bit concerning.
It can be, yeah.
I know I've fallen into the trap of watching the same types of shows over and over again because that's what Netflix keeps recommending.
It's easy to do.
Yeah.
It's a valid concern, and it goes beyond individual preferences. The source material suggests this algorithmic curation can actually shape our social connections. If we're all consuming different content based on personalized recommendations, it might limit our shared cultural experiences and make it harder to connect with others who have different tastes.
Yeah.
Remember those water cooler conversations about the latest episode everyone watched?
Yeah.
Those are becoming less common.
Yeah, that's true.
As our viewing habits become more fragmented.
Yeah, it's almost as if we're all living in these separate streaming universes.
Yeah.
Tailored to our own individual preferences.
That's a great way to put it.
But while we're on the subject of categorization, we shouldn't forget the role of humans in this process. Netflix uses thousands of specific genre labels in its metadata to organize content.
Right.
These labels, though mostly invisible to us, play a significant role in shaping what we're offered.
Right.
And ultimately what we choose to watch.
They do.
It's like those labels are acting as these subtle filters, guiding our viewing habits.
Yeah.
Without us even realizing it.
It's true.
And who decides what those labels are?
Well, that's a good question.
Is it some team of Netflix employees sitting in a room?
I imagine there's a bit of that.
Debating the nuances of film categorization.
Yeah, but it's also influenced by industry trends, data analysis, even the algorithms themselves.
So it's a very complex interplay.
It's complex interplay of human and artificial intelligence, all working together to shape the way we experience entertainment.
It's a bit mind-boggling to think about.
It is.
All these forces at play behind the scenes. But this brings up a really important question.
Okay.
Who has the real power in this dynamic?
Right.
Is it the algorithm? The content creators, the streaming platforms themselves, or ultimately us, the viewers?
That's the million-dollar question, and there's no easy answer.
Yeah.
It's a web of interconnected influences, each with its own leverage.
Right.
But that doesn't mean we're powerless.
Okay.
As consumers, we have more agency than we often realize.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
But how can we as individuals really exert influence? In a system that often feels so massive and impersonal?
Well, it starts with awareness. By understanding how these platforms operate and the forces that shape our choices, we can become more conscious consumers. Every decision we make, what we watch, what we share, what we review, sends signals back into the system, influencing algorithms and shaping the content landscape.
So it's about being more mindful of our choices and understanding that they have consequences beyond our own personal entertainment.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's not just about individual actions. We can amplify our voices by joining online communities, supporting consumer advocacy groups, and engaging in conversations about the impact of technology on our culture and society.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
We often underestimate the power of collective action.
We do.
So the next time I'm scrolling through Netflix or browsing the grocery store aisles, I'll be sure to remember that I'm not just a passive consumer. I'm a participant in a dynamic system.
You are.
And my choices matter.
They do.
That's a great takeaway.
That's the perfect takeaway.
So from Spotify to Mars to Netflix, we've really gone on a journey today.
We have.
To explore the forces that shape businesses. Both internal and external.
Both.
I think we've all learned a lot.
I hope so.
And it's been a really fascinating discussion.
It has been. It's been my pleasure.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of business.
You're welcome.
We hope you've gained some valuable insights and a renewed appreciation for the power of conscious consumption.
Absolutely.
And remember, keep diving deep.